All right, all right. Welcome to week 2. We are here, and I am so excited because we're gonna kind of span out a bit on sleep this week, and I'm gonna share some more applied neurology tools that we can use. But first, I shouldn't say first because this is actually a really fantastic tool that we can use for our nervous systems. Um, it's it's something that we can do to kind of ground ourselves in the present. And so, which is one thing that I know, a lot of people who come into my world will say to me, like, I just don't feel present. I feel like I'm always kind of 3 steps ahead, thinking about things. I can't relax when I'm with my family and with my friends, and I'm supposed to be relaxing, but I just can't do it. I just don't feel present. And so one of the ways that we can do that, and sorry, sidebar, not sidebar, is that when that happens and we kind of have that feeling ongoing, it can make it harder to come out of that activated state, and that affects our sleep. That's why we're talking about that today. So, one of the things that we can do is something called orienting. And essentially, we're just orienting ourselves in the space and bringing ourselves back to the present. So, what I would love you to do or invite you to do just for like 60 seconds here, we're just going to stop and take a moment. And you may be in a room that you've been in like 1,000 times or more, but I want you to just like sit back in your chair. Take a breath in through your nose and out through your mouth. And then just start to notice. Just look around the room and maybe see a crack in the ceiling that you've never noticed before. Maybe note kind of the angles. If you've got molding in your room and like around your windows, maybe notice the color of the paint and how it maybe shifts in some spots. If you've got some greenery around you, just kind of letting your gaze land on that for a moment, just noticing where you are in the room and kind of bringing yourself back to the room. This can be a really helpful tool too if you tend to maybe get a little bit activated or anxious heading into, say, a big work meeting or just a situation or a tough conversation. You can use this tool to kind of anchor yourself back in. So then once you've kind of done a sweep of the room and just kind of notice things, bring your gaze to something in the room that is within your immediate sight line that you find pleasing to look at. Maybe it's a candle on your desk or your favorite mug that you've got sitting there, a picture in the room. And know that that item is there for you at any time if you need to come back to it at the moment or in a moment. So you want to anchor or ground yourself into the space. If anything, whether it's during this call or any other call that you might get on today, is creating a little bit of activation or anxious feelings or any kind of uncertainty, you can always come back and anchor in on that particular object and just kind of notice for a moment. Right now I'm looking at a beautiful candle that I have on my desk and just kind of noticing and like feeling into and kind of picturing it being lit and the smell of it and bringing yourself back into the present. All right, so that is something that we call orienting that we can use anytime we want to come back into the present, kind of reset our nervous system, help create that modulation ongoing again, really helpful with sleep. So I want to start today with a bird's eye view of what sleep is. I know we all know what sleep is, but I want to frame it from a neurosomatic perspective because that's what I do. So I'm going to just share my screen. I'm going to just share my screen for 1 sec. Hello, Whitney. Welcome, welcome. We just did a little orienting exercise. And now I'm just going to share my screen. We're going to just kind of talk about what sleep is. Obviously, we know what sleep is, but I want to frame this from a neurosomatic perspective. So, one moment. Can everybody see my screen? Give me a thumbs up. We're good to go. Okay, awesome. All right. So you might have seen this kind of language of the nervous system loop before. hang on. I just want to, okay. You're seeing, you're seeing just the slide. Yeah. Okay. Fabulous. All right. So I'm just going to make this a little bit smaller. Okay. So you might have seen me talk about this before if you saw the How to Love Your Sleep Lunch and Learn or any of the other masterclass stuff that I've done. But this language of the nervous system or nervous system input output loop is really important kind of as we think about sleep. So the language of the nervous system is really simple when it comes down to it. All day long, we're taking in inputs through our sensory systems from the world around us, from our internal environment. Our brain is, its number one job is to keep us safe, right? So once it takes in an input, then it basically makes an interpretation. It's deciding, is this safe or is this unsafe? And so these are, I want to just kind of break down for a second kind of how those inputs come into play. So we kind of look at three different sensory inputs that we've got. We've got exteroception, proprioception, and interoception. And so once the brain kind of takes in all of these inputs that are happening all around us all the time, makes that interpretation, is this safe or unsafe? And then we produce an output. Okay. And so those outputs exist on a spectrum, and they exist on a spectrum of survival based outcomes all the way over to performance based outcomes, survival or what we call threat based outputs. And so the reason I'm showing you this is because I look at sleep as an output. So sometimes that output is amazing and we feel we have like high quality sleep, we're rested, we're coherent the next day. And sometimes it's subpar, right? And we feel like we're dragging and we can't get our energy up. We're not finding our words. We're lacking in, the physicality that we want. And so these inputs, they're driving our output of sleep. And sleep is considered an expression of the relationship between two major regulators. And so this is really important for us to understand as we're like trying to figure out what is making us sleep and or not sleep. And so I wanted to share with you like these two regulators. We've got process S, process C. So process C is circadian rhythm. And when these processes come together and they function really well, we've got optimal sleep and we feel entrained with the earth. We're in sync with the seasons. We're moving through things fairly well. When they're out of sync, we feel all those issues that I've talked about before, right? Like we can't find our words, we don't feel good physically, all of those things. And so process S, sorry, one sec, my slides are being a little funny here. There we go. Or sleep drive is basically our hunger for sleep. So you can think of it like the longer you go without eating, the hungrier you are. And it's the same with sleep. So sleep drive accumulates during the day based on how long we're awake and the amount of activity that we do. And so you think about like the average person, so any one of us, we need about 16 to 18 hours of wake up time to accumulate enough sleep drive to be sleepy again. And so we want to make sure that we are having that. I hear people a lot of times say like, oh, you get up at say 7 a.m. and it's like, okay, well, I'm tired, so I'm going to go to bed early. Then they go to bed and they lay awake for another 2 hours. And it's because we often haven't accumulated enough sleep drive to be sleepy again and actually have that sleep drive process put us to sleep. So this sleep drive is countered by arousal, which is simply being like revved up physically, mentally, emotionally. And our arousal always works against sleep drive. So I want to share with you now kind of three different types of arousal that we look at when we're looking at arousal. There's conditioned arousal, where we basically taught our brain, and yes, this can happen, to experience arousal in bed, not in the good way, by the way, by like repeatedly being awake and frustrated and anxious in bed. So if we have a history of going to bed and laying there wide awake, every time we do that, we are conditioning our system to do it again and again and again. What we do, we get better at, right? So we can improve conditioned arousal through a sleep reset where we get really strict with our bedtime, our wake time, and what we're actually allowed to be doing in bed. So, in terms of like watching TV, being on our phone, all that kind of stuff, we kind of get really strict about what we are doing in bed. And it's definitely possible to work with conditioned arousal, but it does take time, it takes planning, it takes commitment to the process. And so that's one piece of the pie. The other piece of the pie is circadian arousal, where we're doing things or living life in a way that works against our natural body clock. So we're going to talk about more about that in a sec, but I want to just move on to other arousal, which is basically everything else. So from excitement to caffeine to stress. Spoiler, this has to do with what we talked about last week and your daytime approach to rest, to fun, to the thoughts that you're allowing, which we're going to get into next week. But it's all thanks to an overabundance of all of these types of arousal that you experience those things that we all talk about and why we're here. That kind of mind racing at bedtime, that feeling of having a restless sleep, even when you do sleep, that feeling of being wide awake and exhausted at the same time, right? And it's what keeps you tossing and turning after you wake up at 3 a.m. and you can't get back to sleep. So, no matter where your arousal is coming from, having too much overrides your sleep drive at night and it makes it hard to fall or stay asleep. So you feel so tired because your brain is overworking, but you feel like you can't sleep because your brain is still hyper aroused. All right, so let's talk a little bit about process C or circadian rhythm. So remember, I said there's these two regulators, right? We've got sleep drive, and then we've got our circadian rhythm, which is regulated by the Earth's light and dark cycles. So when the sun comes up and when the sun goes down. And that changes with the seasons. So in summer, we get a lot more light. We've got more energy. In winter, it's darker. We've got less light exposure and we might feel sleepier earlier. Since the time change, I don't know about you all, but I'm experiencing this like desire to actually go to bed later because it's staying light out longer. But I need to kind of work with that because I'm still waking up at the same time. And I know how much sleep I actually need to feel good. So, oh, one thing I wanted to just mention here, because this comes up a lot, is just this idea of sleep opportunity as well. And so this is something that I'm working with for myself right now because we so often are like, okay, I know that I need, 7.5 hours of sleep. So I'm going to go to bed at 10 and I'm going to get up or I'm going to go to bed at 9:30 and get up at 6 or whatever it is. What's my math here? Essentially, what I'm trying to say is we have to look at our sleep opportunity. So if we want 8 hours of sleep, we actually typically need to be in bed for 9 hours to get that 8 hours of sleep. So if you're going to bed at 10 and getting up at 6 and thinking that you're going to get your 8 hours of sleep because you know that's what you need, it's very rare that that actually happens. So we want to kind of look at, okay, what opportunity am I giving myself to sleep, to get the sleep that I know that my body needs? Okay, so process C, governed by our biological clock. We've got this like little tiny piece in our brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. You do not need to remember that, but it's our little thing that perceives light and it signals to the brain to make melatonin in darkness. So the biological clock is like this master conductor and it regulates all of our systems like sleep patterns and hormone production and appetite and digestion and bowel movements and body temperature. And when we're aligned with this rhythm, we typically sleep well. Our hormones function correctly, our bodily functions run smoothly. Some people are wired a little bit differently. Like if you consider yourself a night owl, which is a whole other piece that we can look at. But generally, following the circadian rhythm does get us the results that we're looking for. Again, as long as we've dialed in our other sources of arousal, right? So how do we examine our sleep behavior and our circadian rhythm to see if our life is really allowing for us to work with those light and dark cycles? Sometimes it's really freaking hard. Like, I don't think anyone on the call today works shift work, but you might have kids or a partner who play sports. Maybe you play sports. Maybe you're in, for me, I know for part of the season, I'm sitting in a bright hockey rink at 9 or 10 o'clock at night, right? Um, there's any number of ways that we can kind of get messed up with our circadian rhythm because life gets in the way. But still, there are strategies that help us stay attuned and eliminate circadian arousal as a potential cause for sleep struggles. So I want to just kind of run through a few of those now. And as I'm doing this, like they're all on your screen, take a peek. How are you doing with these things? So one of the things that's really important is getting lots of bright light during the day, especially first thing in the morning. Ideally, we're outside or sitting in a room with lights on. That doesn't have quite the same effect as getting out into the natural light, but we do need light first thing in the morning. I will tell you, there was a study of like almost 500,000 people, I think it was 400,000 people. They did this in the UK, and it found that the more time people spent outside, the better they slept, the less fatigue they felt during the day, and the better their mood was. So, getting light exposure early in the day for 10 to 30 minutes is especially beneficial for sleep. And if you're the type of person who you like to watch a bit of TV at night, you like to use your tablet in the evening, and you're hearing all this stuff about blue light, stay off your devices, stay off your screens at night, I will tell you that the more daytime light you can get, the more early morning light you can get, the less you will suffer the effects of that blue light in the evening. So you actually do not need to get rid of your TV or your tablet at night. The screens will not affect your nighttime melatonin levels or your sleepiness if you've gotten lots of bright light during the day. Okay. If it's not possible for you to do that, we can do things like using a light box in the morning. You know, sometimes when it's darker in the morning, that can be a challenge if we've got to get out of the house into the office or whatever the case may be. So we can use a light box. If we can't have access to daytime light, we can also use those blue blocking glasses at night, right? Okay, what else? We can view evening sun. Same type of thing, same type of effect. We're essentially like teaching our body through the light that it's time to slow down. It's time to get ready for bed. We can look at our eating habits. So your body can anticipate regular meal times. That means we're not going to have those giant glucose and cortisol spikes that keep us awake and keep us from falling back asleep when we're waking up at 3 a.m. Yes, I know I always say, like, I'm not going to tell you not to drink your coffee and not to drink your wine, and I'm not going to do that. Caffeine and alcohol, they definitely affect your sleep, but play with them. Make sure that if you're having caffeine, it's not until, or you stop by, say, 11 a.m. or noon, right? Alcohol, let's have that a little bit earlier in the evening so that you're not getting the effects so close to bedtime. If you're drinking closer to bedtime, I know for me, as I get into the perimenopause stage, I'm noticing like if I do have a glass of wine, say after dinner, or 9 o'clock at night, or a cocktail or something like that, I'm waking up. I'm waking up with my heart racing because there are different things that are happening in our bodies as we get to a certain point, and that alcohol is going to affect our sleep, but we can have it just a little bit earlier in the evening. Maybe it's a pre-dinner cocktail and a glass of wine with dinner, and then we, make some changes from there. All right, so we talked about screens. We want to start reducing the brightness, letting your environment settle in. You could turn down the lights in your house as well. So again, working with the light, it's so, so important. It's just a matter of like starting to integrate it into your overall life. So in my house, I know it took a while, like a few months, maybe even a year before everybody stopped making fun of me for having the lights turned down at 5 o'clock at night, right? Like you come into my house during the winter at 5 o'clock and it's like everything is like low because I'm showing my brain that it's going to be time to slow down and go to bed soon. In your bedroom, blocking out as much light as you possibly can. Also, waking up and falling asleep at consistent times. This lets your body know when morning begins. And the more consistent we can be with this, the better. Obviously, life gets in the way. I totally understand. Sometimes we like to have a little sleep in on the weekend. Not a big deal, but the more consistent we can be, so we're not, waking up at 8 a.m. on Monday, 6 a.m. on Tuesday, 9 a.m. on Wednesday, the more consistent we can be with our wake up times, the more we will entrain, like I said, to the earth's rhythms, and we'll be able to sleep more consistently. Moving our bodies, creating a neurosomatic nighttime routine. We talked about that last week, thinking about those grounding and relaxing exercises, working with our interoceptive tools and our vagus nerve. I'm going to talk a bit more about that in just a sec. Temperature, all of these types of things, right? Think about as well what you're putting into your mind before sleep. Is it news? Is it a scary movie? Is it something that might activate your system, right? Like, are you looking at work emails right before bed? Let's try and look at, okay, how can we cut that off at a certain time so that you're not getting activated right before you're trying to go to sleep. All right, quick gut check. I would love to know how we're doing with these particular circadian rhythm care items. Feel free to just come off mute or pop something in the chat and let me know. Where's my chat? Awful. Tons of room for improvement. Yeah, well, hey, that's great because that means we've got something to work with, right? Well, that's awesome. Then you know what you can work
I
with,
feel like I do a
Chelsea.
fair amount of these already, Rebecca. Like, I've really been trying to be consistent. Like, I turn down the lights after dinner and, like,
Yep.
make sure the room is nice and cold. And yeah, but
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. I'm gonna share a couple of tools with you now because that was a lot of info that I just kind of threw at you. So we're gonna do a couple of tools. Um, and then we're gonna talk about why it actually might feel kind of hard to do the things that I just shared with you, and why we try to do these things and it doesn't always work. And that's a big piece of this. So, but first, I want to just share a couple of tools with you. So, one of the ones that we can do is peripheral vision training. And so peripheral vision training, I'm actually just going to stand up because I want to do a different assessment than we did last week. Stand by. So we know, and we talked about this a little bit last week, is this idea of our visual system.